Hey guys, gonna give people just a minute to trickle in here. And hey, John, hey. Uh, nice. Um, I don't think he's quite a Nazi, but he's certainly a piece of shit. So, oh God, not gonna object too strenuously to that one. Um, yeah, so just wanted to do this to kind of cover a few things that have been going on since the last episode, and also to preview some of what we've got coming up, and also to talk about a little bit what's going on in Philadelphia and a little bit what's going on with the election. So yeah, let's do all that. Then just got back in from walking the dog, just listening to a little Billy Joe Shaver, and feeling mildly sad about that. But going to give me just a second here, guys. Okay. Yeah, not even attempted to rake any of that. This is Roscommon County, so middle of nowhere, rural Michigan. So I have not really found a nice new place to set up the computer with a bookshelf and a plant and all that stuff. Although for the show on Saturday, we'll be back where we were anyway. So yeah, just for that. Hi, Luke. Where are you in the thumb? All right. Yeah. So let's see. So I just to start out with some of what's coming up. Recorded a Halloween bonus episode of the show with Freddy DeBoer, who some people. Hey, Roy, good to see you. Okay, I know where that is. So yeah, Freddy DeBoer. Some people may remember him. He was in one of the very early episodes. I don't know. I guess not that early. I mean, there have only been 11 episodes. So they're all early episodes. But he was on a few episodes ago to talk about his excellent book, The Cult of Smart, which is a really philosophically interesting, but also very personal and very rigorously argued polemic against meritocracy. Not only against the idea that the United States is a meritocracy, but against meritocracy as an ideal. And anyway, really recommend that people read that book. I don't agree with 100% of everything in it, but I think overall it's very good and very important, and I'm a big fan of Freddy's work in general. So anyway, for the Halloween bonus episode, we did one that was completely apolitical, where Freddy came back to break down all of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies with me and talk through his rankings. He does a movie blog, so he'd rank them on there. So he came to talk to me for about an hour. Oh, the book is called The Cult of Smart. So he came last week. He chatted with me for about an hour, pre-recorded, about the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. So I am premiering that on the YouTube channel tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. So that's the Halloween bonus episode, Freddy on Freddy, which is a very fun thing to do. Along the same lines, the kind of cultural, non-political stuff, or as non-political as anything can be. Starting week after next, once a month, going to be doing a Sopranos recap bonus episode. So there could be a monthly bonus episode doing Sopranos recaps with Nando Villa, Big Wozni Lambre, and also Mike Racine, who hosts the Sit Down podcast, which is about organized crime, or at least it was originally. Then it branched out to other things. So again, that's it's going to be me, Mike Racine, Big Woz, and Nando Villa. So we're going to be doing one of those a month. The first one is going to be recorded week after next, November 10th, and then should get out, onto YouTube and onto the podcast feed very shortly after that. So really looking forward to that. The first one, we'll see how it goes for the time, but we're going to We're going to try to cover the first 2 episodes, the first season for that first one in November. So that's season 1, episode 1, The Sopranos, and season 1, episode 2, 46 long. So really looking forward to doing that. And then of course, and the Halloween bonus episode should be out. Like I said, premiering it on YouTube tomorrow at 7:30 Eastern Standard, and then probably go out onto the podcast feed. I'm not sure exactly, maybe Friday. And then the next episode of the actual podcast, episode 12, recording, of course, on Saturday. Patrons get to watch that live as it's being recorded. On the there's going to be a stream on the Patreon. If you can't swing the $5 a month, but you do want to be part of that online studio audience, I get it. I've definitely been there. Not that long ago, I was an adjunct at Rutgers until very recently. So just send me a DM and I'll hook you up with the link a few minutes before the episode. But then, as always, it goes out as after some editing, some sound editing by David Feldman, some video editing by Forrest Miller, who's a very talented video editor. If you need some video editing work, you should hit him up. But after some editing by those people, it goes out as a podcast on usually late Sunday night, and it always premieres on YouTube Monday on 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So the guests for episode 12 are going to be Greg Belvidere, who's going to be coming for about 20 minutes at the beginning of the episode Rutgers is a great place to go to study philosophy. I mean, it's a really good department. Even as an undergrad, you get to take some classes from some great people. I'm not sure exactly right now. I've kind of lost track, but they had, I think he may be retired now, but they had Alvin Goldman, who's a really huge, really interesting epistemologist. Sure. Hi, George. And they had Derek Parfit, who passed on a few years ago, but is one of my favorite 21st century philosophers. Thank you. Really enjoyed the debate. Anybody who hasn't seen that, I did a debate with Nico House that premiered. I did it on the Surf's Twitch channel last week, but it premiered here on the YouTube channel last night. So you can watch it there about what leftists should do in swing states in the election. Actually, I kind of am living in the woods right now. Hey, Harvey, friend of the show, Harvey JK. But yeah, I'm in Roscommon County, which is sort of deep middle of nowhere, Michigan, literally on the edge of the woods, as you can see in the background. So we're Jennifer and I are still teaching in Georgia, but we're doing it remotely. Look, I'm always happy to debate Mr. Reagan again. I think that those 2 debates, for people who haven't watched them, Mr. Reagan is I always feel so silly saying these YouTube names, but he's a fairly prominent conservative YouTuber. It's like 250,000 YouTube subscribers. Roscommon County. Thank you, Harvey. Harvey says nationalize Walmart, which is a good reminder if you haven't seen that yet. My most recent article for Jacobin, I do a weekly column kind of thing there. It's called Nationalize Walmart. It just came out today. That was kind of deep in militia land. I was happy when I saw when the people were arrested for plotting to kidnap Governor Whitmer. I was happy to see that none of them came from Roscommon County. I think, gonna pass on the Vosh question, but I was gonna say Mr. Reagan. Mr. Reagan's like a fairly prominent conservative YouTuber. I did 2 debates with him. both at Modern Day Debate, although they also gave me the files so I could premiere both of them here on the YouTube channel. Yeah, I shop at I shop at Walmart regularly. I mean, it's incredibly convenient. I don't believe in lifestyleism. I don't believe in the idea of like sort of trying to promote a kinder, gentler capitalism by making different consumer decisions. I mean, if there were a worker cooperative grocery store where I am, I'd certainly shop there. But I do shop at Meijer when I am in places that have one, although here is actually too deep in the middle of nowhere to even have Meijer, which, if you don't know what I'm talking about, is a big Walmart-ish chain, although at least it's unionized, that's all over the place in Michigan, but not out here. No, I'm sure that's definitely not Mr. Reagan's name. His name is Chris something, I don't remember, but it's Mr. Reagan on YouTube. So I did 2 debates with him, one on whether racism is still a significant social problem in the United States. My ice cold take is, yeah, clearly. Yeah, no, I think Vosh is right about what leftists should do in swing states. I don't disagree with him about that. I don't think he pitches it right. Let's put it that way. I think that some of what he says for a comradely debate within the socialist movement, I think some of what he says is very abrasive and very condescending. Some of it kind of comes off as scolding. And I think that's exactly the wrong way to approach people who might, need that tactical advice or who might be on a different page with that. Thanks, Harvey. So yeah, Mr. Reagan, trust me, torches and pitchforks. I'm not a trust fund socialist. I'd love to have a trust fund, but I don't have one. Oh man, I wish that were true. Yeah, so I think vote shaming is a very bad idea. I think anybody who's ever interacted, Vosh is a trust fund socialist. I don't know. Look, I mean, Ingalls was a trust fund socialist. I wouldn't necessarily I wouldn't necessarily put too much stock in that one way or the other. There are people. Look, Megan Day comes from money, and I think she's fantastic. That's a good contemporary Ingalls. I like I said, I don't. I wish I did, but in any case, I do think he's approaching that wrong. I think vote shaming is a very bad idea. I think anybody who's ever interacted with a human being for 10 seconds should know that most people react very badly to being scolded. It's usually very counterproductive. It's the worst possible get out the vote strategy. I don't understand why people do it. I'm willing to give my tactical advice to anybody who asks for it, and I'm willing to argue with it if anybody wants to debate it with me, but that's very different from sort of shaming and scolding people who have a different take on that, right? I don't believe in doing that. Thank you for the super sticker, Joe Broomer, much appreciated. Yeah, no, Marx did need Ingalls money to survive, so it's a good thing that Ingalls came from that. By the way, if anybody's seen the movie, was it The Young Karl Marx? I think it's just called. I enjoyed that. I mean, I don't think it's an amazing movie or anything, but it was good, and I think it gives you a sense of the people and their lives, and it's good stuff. Yeah, no, we are less than a week away from the election. So yeah, the first debate I did with Mr. Reagan was about whether racism is still a significant social problem in the United States. The second one, it was about the election, about basically whether Donald Trump deserves a second term. And I think he did better in the second one than the first one, right? I mean, no false modesty. I think that in the first one, he was kind of flailing because he was, I was bringing up stuff like studies about how not only are black motorists pulled over at a higher rate than white motorists, but the gap actually diminishes after dark when the sun goes down, right? So it's harder for traffic cops to tell the race of the driver. Or there's a study where job applicants with black-sounding names are called back at a significantly lower rate than job applicants or fake job applicants for the study with white-sounding names. And he was kind of having to come up with reasons on the fly to come up with some ridiculous ad hoc explanation that's not about racial prejudice. So I think he did pretty badly in that one. I think he did better in the second one. I don't think he did great. I think he particularly didn't have any good response to what I was saying about the labor stuff, except to say, "Oh, this is old style socialist preoccupation that you care about labor unions and everything Trump has been doing to destroy them, which honestly, I think is just a bad strategy if you want people to vote for Trump, because in like Pennsylvania, where the election's probably going to come down to, a lot of people there who could go either way know very damn well that labor unions are the best way to give people a living wage and say on the job and health and safety and all of those things. So I think just kind of dismissing it as a silly common preoccupation was, if nothing else, I think it was a tact mistake for Mr. Reagan. Oh, is my county blue? I doubt it. Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think in the racism debate, he really did want me to argue that racism equals privilege plus power, and then he kind of didn't know what to do with it when I didn't, because I don't think that's the only thing racism can mean. I think there are at least three different things racism can mean. We talk about either individual racism or structural racism, right? I think that the three things we can mean are just racial prejudice and people acting individually on the basis of racial prejudice. The second thing we can mean is kind of privilege plus power, right? Which is people in positions of power within institutions acting on the basis of prejudice, and that job applicant study and the black drivers being pulled over study are both examples of the second category. And then the third category is just institutions tending to disfavor the interests of black people relative to white people, not necessarily as a result of any sort of prejudice by individuals in them now, but just on the basis of their historical origins. And I think all three of those are real social problems, and all three of them feed into each other, which honestly just seems kind of obvious to me. Yeah, I think people in any race can be racist in the first sense. The other two senses less so, because if you're a black or Asian person who hates white people, good luck, getting an institution to act on that. But yeah, so I think in the second debate, Mr. Reagan did better than the first debate, because in the second debate, it was more on his turf, because this is what he's been doing for the last 4 years, is he's been defending every asinine thing that the Trump administration does and coming up with some sort of talking point about whatever to counter whatever the anti-Trump talking point is. Whereas in the first one, he just kind of didn't have a good answer to the racism stuff. And I think that was pretty obvious. I think in the second one, I still don't think he did great, but I think he was much more together in the second one. Even though, again, I think that I think the two most ridiculous moments for him in there were one when he hey Jason, one he did he said yeah, one is the one I already mentioned about labor unions. I think he just didn't have a good response on that, the decisions that Trump's National Labor Relations Board has made. And the other one was when he was insisting with the COVID discussion we kept getting pulled back into. He kept insisting that that asymptomatic transmission wasn't really a thing, or that that it was incredibly rare. He said that somebody is asymptomatic and they infect others with COVID. And then as we were talking, I looked up what the CDC says, right? This is not the World Health Organization, which Trump pulled out of. This is Trump's own CDC. And the CDC says that about 40% of transmission of COVID is asymptomatic. And he was just kind of forced to say, well, the CDC is wrong, right? I, as a non-expert, knew better than the CDC. And he'd sort of vaguely claimed that he'd seen some other statistics from the World Health Organization, but he couldn't actually produce them. So yeah, I don't think that was a good moment for him. But yeah, look, I'd totally be happy to debate Mr. Reagan again, really about whatever, right? But certainly, I'm he wants to do that like once a month or something. I'm happy to do that. Yeah, I don't. I think as far as the election goes, right? I mean, I'm willing to say, right? Look, I voted for Biden because I live in Michigan, and and Hillary Clinton lost Michigan by less than 0.25% last time, and so I'm willing to make that tactical call. But I think that as far as like going around telling people Biden is great, vote blue, whatever, uh, I believe I think that any long-term strategy for radical change has to start. This is kind of a cheesy way to put it, but I'm just going to go for it with radical honesty. And I don't think you should lie to people about how bad Biden and the Democrats are. They really are that bad. I mean, my God, I just saw today there was a reporter who asked Biden. I just want to make sure I've got the exact wording right. Here's the question the reporter asked Biden as Biden and Jill were in the polling place. Reporter, what do you say to Philadelphia residents that are outraged by yet another unarmed black man being shot by the police? So that's the question. The only subject he's being asked about in that question is the police shooting. Biden's response, what I say is there is no excuse ever for the looting and the violence. And then he kind of goes on from there to saying some incredibly vague stuff about doing something or other to make use of lethal force by police less likely. But the fact that the fact that he's so worried about those suburban moderate Republicans who he thinks he can get in the Philly suburbs, that he's not even willing to just address the question about the police shooting without pivoting to violence and looting by rioters, really tells you everything, right? And yeah, that's absolutely true. Kurt says in the chat, Philadelphia's a police riot. If you watch videos, 100%. I mean, God, I saw a video last night where there were literally cops in Philly who there was a car that was like trying to turn. It was like about to go to the police line. It tried to turn around. Cops literally busted in the window and dragged out the driver. It's completely insane, right? And it's not even just cynical. I mean, this is who Biden is. Back, not very many years ago, before the winds shifted on this issue, he was bragging about how he wrote the crime bill. Yeah, so Harvey says talks in the chat about pulling Biden to the left, and I hope you're right. I mean, I'm pretty cynical, honestly. I'm pretty black-pilled about this, but well, it makes me want to drink with both hands. But yeah, look, I'm not super confident about pulling Biden to the left. I mean, like I said at the beginning of the debate with Nico House, I'm not pessimistic enough to believe that Trump is going to go full fascist in a second term, and we'll all be, Jacobin will be shut down, and me and my podcaster friends will all be in a concentration camp. I don't believe that particularly. I'm also not optimistic enough to believe that Biden is going to that we're going to be able to extract concessions from Biden on the level of like Medicare for all and a Green New Deal or anything like that. So why did I vote for Biden? Right? Why do I encourage other people in swing states to vote for Biden? I actually just had an article I co-wrote with Matt McManus about this that came out in REO magazine. That's AREO, REO, and the big thing we pointed out there, well, there are two big things we pointed out there, one of which was the big thing that I was emphasizing in my debate with Nico House. And these are basically, I think, these aren't the only reasons, right? But I think these are two really striking reasons why even those of us who are incredibly cynical about Biden, who basically think that he's a senile neoliberal warmonger, why we should want him to win the election and Trump to lose. Which again, to me, I don't think we should like do the progressives for Biden thing and say, oh, Biden's not perfect, but, or, he's not my first choice. No, I think we should be completely honest about how bad Biden is. But I really like the way that in like 2002, the incumbent president was in France was Jacques Chirac, who was a who was a conservative who was correctly hated by the French left. And because in France they have two-stage elections. There's the initial kind of jungle round. It's like a California primary, and then the top two vote getters go into the second stage. And in the second stage, it was Jacques Chirac, who's the conservative incumbent, and Jean-Marie Le Pen, who is a oh yes, thank you for warning people. Somebody in the chat says, Ben Burgis is shilling for the Biden campaign. Do not be fooled. Yes. Oh, no, that is very important that you understand that the sort of like cynical, nuanced thing I'm telling you about the conclusions I've come to about electoral tactics aren't because I actually believe them or anything like that. It's because I'm on the payroll of the Biden campaign again. I wish, right? I want that Biden money to come in, just like I want that Soros money to come in, just like I wish I had that trust fund. But yeah, no, I am very skeptical about the Dems packing the court. I just think it would be too destabilizing to Capitol for Biden to do. I mean, I'd love to be proven wrong about that, but I think that he doesn't want to do anything that's going to spook the business class in the way that I think the Supreme Court, like that institution, I mean, there are a lot of very there are a lot of very norm-upsetting things that have happened in the last couple of decades with, the drone war and the upturning of the Fourth Amendment, essentially with the Patriot Act, everything else. Thank you very much, Le Fin Absolute du Monde. Forgive my French pronunciation. Says in super chat, this is as close as I can get you to Soros money. I really appreciate that. But look, sorry, I got off track. Yeah, so I think that having the Supreme Court be a relatively stable institution to sort of safeguard the continuity of the system, I think is going to be important to centrist Democrats like Biden. I mean, I think that institutions that protect like the lives of brown people being killed in drone strikes, they're happy to overturn those. But I think that institutions that are central to domestic stability, I think they'd be very leery about that. So I'd love to be surprised. I don't think Biden's going to pack the court. But this is what I was saying about the French Revolution. Oh, yes, sorry, you're right. I saw that earlier, and I forgot who was who. Yes, thank you, Jason, for the super chat. It's Jason from This is Revolution, comrade. All right. So yeah, look, I think the French elections are a good model, right? So in that French election in 2002, when Jacques Chirac was the conservative incumbent and the neo-fascist Jean-Marie Le Pen was the only other candidate in the runoff, French socialists and communists did largely vote for Chirac in the runoff, but so many of them were talking about putting on rubber gloves or putting clothespins on their noses that French courts had to intervene and say, no, you're not allowed to do stunts like that at the polling places. And fair enough. Oh, man. You got to tell the National Endowment for Democracy, if I'm on their payroll, that they must have been sending the checks to the wrong place. I'm happy to correct them or just send them straight to the Patreon. They can do that. So yeah, look, I think that I think we should just be honest and French about it, right? Like we don't have to lie about Biden. We don't have to claim that he's one bit better than he is. We don't have to pretend like he's maybe somebody who can have a road to Damascus moment and become Bernie. But we can still say that the election matters basically for a couple reasons, right? So yes, it'd be amazing to be on the court when they had to rule about that. Kurt says, sent 30,000 texts and thousands of phone calls. Hate to tell you, being a Biden shill doesn't pay that well. Okay, well, never mind. In that case, maybe I'll be a Trump shill. I don't know. But not going to do that. All right. But look, I think that we can make tactical and strategic decisions about which enemy we want to That's right. Officially endorse Trump. You heard it here first. We can make just strategic decisions about which enemy we want to fight with, about which issues for the next 4 years. And I think there are a couple reasons why that enemy should be Biden, not Trump. Right? Why it would be very bad if Trump was reelected, and it would be better if Biden was elected. One of those really emphasized in the article that I co-wrote with Matt, that's out in ARIA magazine today, is the COVID response. So I think as far as like short-term harm reduction, that's the most powerful argument that the Trump administration's bizarre, incompetent handling of the COVID crisis has led to a combination of public health and economic emergencies that have been totally unprecedented, and it's one of the very worst in the world. Like there's a website that I was looking at earlier this week that tracks 150 countries for COVID deaths per million, and the United States isn't the worst, but it's the 9th worst out of 150. So, and out of the 8 countries that are doing worse than us in terms of deaths per million, only 2 of them are in the first world, Spain and Belgium. So I think that's one big thing. And if you want to talk about harm reduction, I think there's tons of other stuff that you could get into, like even in terms of the stuff that people like me were justly outraged about the Obama administration for, like drone strikes. There was an article that just came out in the Daily Beast about Trump doubling the rate of drone strikes in Yemen, essentially. He's done about as much in he's done about as much in 4 years as Obama did in 8 years. And he's lifted the few half-hearted restrictions there were on Obama's use of drone strikes. Similarly, Obama deported tons of people. He's very bad about that, right? Like that was, Obama really streamlined that deportation machine. But when he handed the deportation machine over to Trump, Trump went nuts. He didn't succeed in deporting as many people because of local resistance, but he escalated that in all sorts of ways, right? Like there were whole family detention camps under Obama, which is bad enough, but child separation was a Trump special. So I think that there is a lot that you could point to there as far as harm reduction. But what I really emphasized in the debate with Nico House wasn't even a harm reduction argument; it was a strategic argument. So the strategic argument is that look at Trump's National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB. It's not sexy. Nobody talks about it, but everybody on the left at least should be talking about it because it's absolutely crucial for what we care about. Like the whole telos of socialist politics, our lodestar needs to be organizing the working class. And what the rules of the road are for labor organizing, like it actually does unfortunately make a big difference whether the Democratic machine or the Republican machine is in power. Because with the Democratic machine in power, as with Obama or with Biden, you're going to get mediocre Democrats appointed to the NLRB for the most part. And every once in a while, they might do some stupid stunt like appointing a Republican for the sake of bipartisanship. But for the most part, you'll get mediocre Democrats appointed to the NLRB. And with the Republican machine in power, with Trump, or for that matter, if Romney had won or whatever, right, then you get Republicans appointed to the NLRB. And when I say Republicans appointed to the NLRB, what I'm really talking about here are people whose entire mission in life, what makes them get up in the morning, what drives them forward is trying to stamp out what's left of collective bargaining in the United States. And this is a play. Oh yeah, totally. Obama needs to give that Nobel back. Obama's foreign policy was disgusting. No argument from me there. So look, this is a place that's really strategically important and where the differences are really unambiguous. Like the more you start looking at it, like watch the interview that I did with Paul Prescott. It's a few videos back on the channel, or read Paul Prescott's article about this in Jacobin. It's Prescott, Prescod, that there's a whole series of Obama-era precedents that were reversed by Trump's NLRB, and always in the direction of making it harder to organize new unions where they don't exist, making it harder to recruit new workers into unions where they do exist, making it harder to file grievances, making it harder to file union elections. Nice. Yeah, I love Paul Prescott. He's great. Even before I interviewed him for GTAA, he should start saying GTAA. That rolls off the tongue more easily. But even before then, Adam Proctor and I interviewed him a couple times on Dead Pundit Society, and yeah, I'm a big fan. But really, like, you start looking at the details of these rulings, and they're really bad. And again, we don't have to speculate about the Trump-Biden difference there because we can just look at the Trump-Obama distinction. So I think that, yeah, I don't know that Biden is very much less dangerous in terms of imperial policy. I mean, I will say that Trump did lift the few half-hearted checks on the process for drone strikes that Obama had put on. But I'm not confident that Biden would be significantly better in terms of foreign policy. I don't think I don't think that that's. I'm not convinced of that, right? I think this NLRB thing is a really clear distinction, and like going from mundane but really important stuff. If you've ever been a union organizer, I was a union activist, and I was on the executive board of my union local for adjuncts at Rutgers, and yeah, they've given some goofy Nobel Peace Prizes. Kissinger is the worst, but a lot of them are very bad. Going from relatively mundane but really important stuff like is the union allowed to distribute literature in public areas of the employer's property, like the area outside of a grocery store where the Salvation Army might be set up? Can the union set up there? Up through like really bad stuff like using COVID as an excuse to cancel all elections to certify new unions, even though you could easily do that online or through the mail. Speaking of COVID, ruling that unions aren't allowed, like that don't have a right to bargain on health and safety issues raised by the COVID crisis, that you can't, that speaking out about the inadequate PPE at your workplace is not protected speech. It's really bad, right? And I think it's a really clear distinction. And again, the point is not that Biden is not a neoliberal piece of shit. He is, right? He's definitely an enemy of the working class, but he's a very different kind of enemy of the working class than Trump, right? They're both representatives of the ruling class, but they're both pursuing very different ruling class strategies. And I think we can be real about that. I don't think that's like selling out to the Democrats or anything to just, call it like it is in that regard. Yeah, I'm not going to leave out the and. I believe GTA is universally associated with something else. So yeah, look, I mean, Biden, of course, he's going to disappoint. I mean, I've already got planned the Jacobin piece that I'm going to do the day after. I'm an atheist, but I just crossed myself. The day after Biden wins, which is just going to be called No Honeymoon, and it's going to argue that we shouldn't take seriously any of the stuff that's any of the good, progressive, even social democratic-y stuff that Biden says buried somewhere on a campaign website that he's going to do, because we can just look at his career and see that he's always been a center-right guy. Or really worse than that on some issues. I mean, especially mass incarceration, he was particularly awful. And we could just look at the Obama record, right? Obama, when he was running for president in 2008, was against an individual mandate, for a public option. He was for card check for unions. None of that stuff happened. Right? So I think that, sadly, I do think that Rockstar Games would probably make an issue of it if I just started calling the show GTA instead of GTAA. So yeah, I mean, I think Biden disappointing to me goes without saying. I think you just have to bake that in. That just has to be factored in from the beginning. Of course, Biden is not going to follow through on most of the good stuff that he's saying he'll do right now, because he has no incentive to spend political capital trying to make any of that stuff happening when there's the inevitable establishment resistance. So the reason that I think that leftists and swing states should vote for Biden is not because I think that we should have a sunny view of Biden, but just because he's the enemy I'd rather fight, because he's not going to appoint aggressive union busters to the National Labor Relations Board. He's not. He's also not going to be doing things like sending the Department of Homeland Security to Portland to shove protesters in unmarked vans, because I think those kinds of institutional escalations of the war against the left and the war against unions, I think Biden would just have a different strategy. I don't think he would do any of that stuff. And so even though I'm very cynical about Biden, coming around on Medicare for all, or even really doing the public option, or certainly packing the court, I don't think any of that's going to happen. But I think that it's like a necessary defensive thing to vote for Biden. That's the way I'd put it. It's like hitting the sleep button. It's hitting the sleep button on the alarm clock as far as some of the worst stuff that Trump is doing, which I know is not a very inspiring metaphor, but it's not supposed to be. Because I think what we need to realize is that if the conditions that led to Trump don't go anywhere, then even though Trump himself may not come back, somebody else will. Right? Trumpism isn't going anywhere. We're going to get, some Trump-like, right-wing demagogue, maybe Tom Cotton. Tom Cotton has apparently already been making some moves to maybe lay the groundwork for a run in 2024. Maybe Tucker Carlson, will take his turn in presidential politics. We're going to get one of these ghouls to come in to play the Trump role. And the next Trump might be even worse if we don't do anything about the conditions that led to Trump in the first place. So I think that having a neoliberal like Biden be in office can't be a permanent solution. It's just a stopgap to give the left some time to get its shit together. So ultimately what we need to do is get a Bernie-style candidate to actually win the nomination and become president. Oh, I should say, by the way, actually, the name of the show was Harvey K's idea. I was Skyping with him before I started it, before the first episode. I was thinking, I'm going to do a podcast. I'm thinking maybe Logic for the Left. He was like, don't call it that. Call it Give Them an Argument. That sounds better. And he was 100% right about that. Hold on. What's this? Roy. Check out Revolution, Jason's podcast. I think that, so if you watch the Nico House debate, this stuff is what I pushed in there, these points, especially the point about unions, because again, I know it can seem kind of like one note. Like, why is Ben always obsessed with this labor stuff? Why is it, all unions all the time? There are other things that matter. And it's not that I don't think there are other things that matter. I think there are lots of things. I think there are tons of other things that matter. The question is about strategy, right? In other words, if we're going to build a left that has actual institutional muscle that can win primaries and general elections, and remember, even if Bernie had won, that would be less than half the battle, because the question then, even if, whatever, fill out the fantasy scenario however you want to, lots of, the squad quadrupling and whatever, just getting his agenda through Congress, and then overcoming resistance from the courts, from all these institutions that would stand in the way of a serious attempt at American social democracy. I think that would be, again, I think all that would be more than half the battle. And to win that battle, we need those ground troops of organized labor. And that's not just for the sake of issues at the workplace. This is not a class reductionist argument I'm making. This is for the sake of all issues. Look at the, at the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s. Like if you ever look at pictures from the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1964, half of the signs on there say UAW on them, United Auto Workers. Like this is just the sort of like, if you're going to have that ground level muscle, those ground troops for a left agenda. I mean, I think any successful left movement is got to have a revitalized and rebuilt labor movement at its base, which is why I'm so fixated on this issue about the NLRB and protecting what's left of organized labor in the United States, so we can rebuild for the future. Which is, and look, I'm not just talking about actually achieving socialism, worker control of the means of production. I think even a reformist agenda is going to have that militant, organized working class base to push it through. And yeah, the jobs and freedom part has been totally disappeared. It's like that. It's like that picture from the liberation of Berlin from the Nazis, where the guy's holding up the red flag, and then you see like the later versions of it in textbooks and stuff where the red flag has disappeared from the picture, or for that matter, like the Stalinist version with the those pictures of like Lenin and Trotsky walking down the street in Petrograd, and then later in the 30s, Trotsky's whited out of the picture. It's like that, right? It's all people remember now is March on Washington, not March on Washington for jobs and freedom, because again, Martin Luther King, Bayard Rustin, these guys were very smart strategists, and they understood that the best strategy for civil rights in America, for undoing the deep economic inequality between white and black Americans. There was a legacy of Jim Crow and everything before and after that, that the best strategy for that was to tie it to the social democratic economic agenda, that's the jobs and freedom, and then to have this deep alliance with the labor movement. And they were totally right about that. And I think that formula has not been improved on, and I think that the same lesson has to be learned anew right now. Harvey, JK. Next time I do this, I should just have Harvey on. The other side of the YouTube window here, so instead of having to read out his comments, because this is good stuff. Says only when we revive labor unionism and create new solidarities among workers will we be able to counter the conservatives and neoliberal class war versus the democratic legacy of generations. Solidarity, absolutely, right? Okay, so I don't think I ever actually said earlier. Wow, John says this is totally off topic. Would you ever do a podcast, the former Beatle, John Lennon? Maybe Harvey JK could help out. I've got to say, I'm not like one of those like weird contrarians who says he doesn't like the Beatles. I do like the Beatles, although the Rolling Stones are much more my speed as far as classic rock goes. Yes, Harvey says the Civil Rights Act depended on the UAW. The union paid the bill to bus everyone to the March on Washington. Absolutely right. By the way, fun fact: my great-grandfather, Morris Field, it was Moshe Blumenfeld pre-Ellis Island, but Morris Field after that. So my great-grandfather Morris was on the international executive board of the UAW, and he actually had he was a member of not the Communist Party, but like a splinter that was led by Jay Lovestone. That was like the wing of the communist movement that identified with Nikolai Bukharin's faction in the USSR. And he was actually part of a Marxist reading group with May Ruther, who's Walter Reuther's wife. So a fun little bit of historical trivia. There's a story that I tell in my next book about Great-Grandpa Field. I found this out in a book called Black Detroit and the Rise of the UAW. And it's like, oh, hey, that's Great-Grandpa, right? Who I only met like once, as a little kid. He died when I was very little. But during World War II, because so many white skilled workers were on the front lines, there was a group of black workers who was brought into auto plant in Detroit to do some skilled trades jobs that that normally only white workers would be allowed to, and there was actually a racist walkout because of it. And then they called in somebody from the UAW office, who was Great Grandpa Morris, who came in and said he was in there for about 5 minutes. Apparently, he came out and announced. Gave a 3-word statement, which was "the Negro stay." So it's not exactly the St. Crispin's Day speech from Henry V, but at least Great Grandpa was on the right side of history. But yeah, look, read the Beatles. Again, I'm not some contrarian Beatles hater. I like the Beatles. I like the Rolling Stones a lot more as far as that goes. But I think John Lennon, he was a great. I think he was a great lyricist, but I think that's the thing that I like. Thank you, Harvey. I really appreciate that. I think that's the best thing about him, right? Like I love the lyrics of Working Class Hero, but honestly, I know this is heretical. I vastly prefer Ozzy Osbourne's cover of Working Class Hero to the original. I think when Ozzy sings it, you can really feel it, in a way that you can't with John Lennon. Maybe because Ozzy really came from that background, right? If you read his memoir, This Is Ozzy or whatever, I'm sure he didn't write it, right? I'm sure that he kind of mumbled a bunch of recollections at his co-author, and the co-author wrote it. But oh yeah, I love Black Sabbath, or really, I should say, I love Ozzy era Black Sabbath. Not a huge fan of Dio era Black Sabbath, although I do like a lot of Dio's solo work. Ozzy did an album. I think it was called Undercover. It's all covers of various songs, and the version of Working Class Hero on there is. But anyway, yeah, if you read that book, War Pigs, love that. Okay, Heaven and Hell is Dio era. I haven't listened to it in a while. Just for you, Jason. I'll go back and listen to it again. But in any case, like Ozzy really came from that kind of working class background. Talks about growing up, playing in places that had been bombed out by the Nazis during the war and were sort of reclaimed as playgrounds. And he was actually worked at a meat process, like a slaughterhouse, which is a pretty grim part of the book. Oh wow, yeah, did you say that? I wanted to be a Beatle. Actually, my favorite line, I think the most insightful thing Ozzy says in that book, is he says, people say that we started metal as a genre with Black Sabbath, but I never saw it that way. As far as I was concerned, we were just a 12-tone blues band that played a few spooky songs. And I think it's exaggerated, but I think there's some insight there. Thomas asks, which guitarist was Ozzy best with? That's hard, right? Because obviously Randy Rhoads has got the that really amazing sort of virtuoso kind of guitar style, but I can't not say Tony Iommi, right? Because that's such an amazing story, how he, speaking of working class roots, right, when Tony Iommi kind of did innovate that the most distinctively metal thing, about Black Sabbath, besides the lyrics, which is Tony Iommi's guitar style, right? Which is not something he planned to do, but the story he tells is apparently he. I think I mentioned this on the stream before, but just real quickly, right? Just because I love the story, I'll tell it again. That he had a job at a factory, and Black Sabbath had just been signed, and so he didn't need the factory job anymore. So he went home at lunchtime and told his mom that they were signed by a label, that he can quit his job. They're going to tour or whatever. And so, he said, in fact, I don't think I'm even going to come back for the second half of his day. And his mom, said, oh no, Tony, you should quit right, finish out the day. And so then he goes back to work, and during the second half of the day after lunch, he gets into an industrial accident and slices off some of his fingertips. And so he had to really. Do you mean kale, Harvey? There we go. Do you So he really had to like figure out a new way to play his guitar after that. So if that for nothing else, I mean, maybe it's not a purest musical answer, but I would have to go with that. Yeah, Torches and Pitchforks says I think Sabbath would have been bigger, but Led Zeppelin happened. I think that might be right. Right. I think that in a Zeppelinless world, I think that Sabbath, like the things that Zeppelin and Sabbath were starting to do around the same time. Yeah, that's right. Roy says, never given 2 weeks notice again after that story. Absolutely right. so, so yeah, I think that is probably true, right? That in a Zeppelinless world, Sabbath, would have been even bigger than it was because they would have been the only ones starting to do some of the things that both were doing. But of course, I wouldn't want to live in that world. I love Zeppelin. That's like Zeppelin's probably my very favorite, or definitely right, my very favorite classic rock band. Yeah, Zeppelin and the Stones. And then Ozzy or Black Sabbath, is a solid runner-up to those two. Yeah. Thank you, Harvey. Although I'm actually not drinking scotch right now. This is Whistle Pig, which is a rye that I like a lot. Yeah, if John Bonham were alive, Zeppelin would still be here. Although, I mean, obviously, obviously, I wish it was. That would be amazing to go see. Even in its geriatric form, that would still be amazing to go see. I actually loved the was in 2007, I think. There was a Zeppelin reunion concert in London. They had John Bonham's son, Jason Bonham, on drums, and they showed that they did like one of those special one-day things in the theater and like AMC. So I went to see it with some friends who got possibly hypothetically got very high in the parking lot and then went in to see the concert, and that was amazing. But look, I would have loved to so obviously it'd be great, if Bonham was still alive. I would love to see Zeppelin in concert, but like in a sense, I think it was good for their legacy that he died when he did in 1980. Because now Page and Plant with the Black Crowes, I would have loved to see that. Because if you think about it, right, like imagine that Keith Richards had died at the same time that John Bonham did, right? That like, I don't know, they were in a drinking contest together and they both died in the same night. Then think about the difference between the way that people would think about the Stones and the Stones discography if that had happened versus right now. And because nobody, like, I've never met the person whose favorite Stones album is Bridges to Babylon or Voodoo Lounge. I don't think that person exists. And so, of course, there's this amazing stuff in the Rolling Stones discography. There's Aftermath, there's Let It Bleed, there's Sticky Fingers, there's Exile on Main Street, which is certainly my favorite. But there's also, both because it took them a while to kind of find their voice, right? In the early albums, there's some very poppy, forgettable stuff early on, and because there was a lot of inferior work going on, like in the 80s and afterwards. Yeah, actually, Keith Richards did do a solo album that I liked, Cross-Eyed Heart, which has some really good stuff on it, some blues covers. I'm always a sucker for a Goodnight Irene cover. Oh God, Tattoo You, yeah. So yeah, like, so the stuff, like, I think there are probably about as many good Stones albums, or almost as many as there are good Zeppelin albums, but they're but they're kind of buried in all these albums that aren't as good. Oh man, yeah, I love Tumbling Dice. It's a great song. Beggar's Banquet. I should have listed that off too. Yeah, Sticky Fingers is great. But part of the reason that Zeppelin has that special kind of shine on them is because they didn't put out very many albums, right? There are 7 studio albums, I think, right? They're the 4 Roman numeral ones, 1 through 4. There's Houses of the Holy, Physical Graffiti, Presence, Oh, sorry, 8, because there's also, unfortunately, In Through the Outdoor, um, which is the yeah, sorry. Uh, so, which is the one where they're starting to decline, right? There's some great tracks on In Through the Outdoor. I love Fool in the Rain, but that's the only Zeppelin studio album that's not just amazing. Uh, because and I think, unfortunately, that is probably John Paul Jones's fault, because usually Jimmy Page, as is my understanding, kind of was like the main like person dominating, putting together the albums. But I think at that point he was such a non-functional heroin addict, that he wasn't up to it. Uh, yeah, In Through the Outdoor was real rough, real mixed bag. But that's the thing. There's only one out of 8 Zeppelin studio albums, right? Their entire studio discography you can listen to easily in an afternoon, right? Probably won't even finish the bottle of whiskey. Uh, but uh, yeah, Love House is the Holy. Um, I mean, which one I like most depends on the day. I think a Zeppelin album that doesn't get nearly enough love is Presence. I think Achilles' Last Stand alone, I think is very much worth the price of admission. Yeah, it's an amazing ratio. And so that's the thing, because Zeppelin, they didn't have to like do a few albums of forgettable stuff to kind of find their footing. They started out amazing, because even though Plant and Bonham didn't have previous professional experience, really, like they'd been in some bands, but not anything much. In fact, Plant, I think, literally was coming in from a construction site to the audition. But John Paul Jones and Jimmy Page, were both like very experienced guys. Jimmy Page had obviously been in the Yardbirds, and they've both been like experienced studio musicians, and they really knew what they wanted to do. So they started out amazing with Zeppelin 1, and then they, because Bonham died at just the right time, right? I mean, obviously it's a huge loss, not just human terms for people who loved him, but for music, right? I mean, he's obviously probably the greatest rock drummer ever, but because he died at just the right time, that means that they're really, other than In Through the Outdoor being a mixed bag, there's really nothing that in the studio discography that's not amazing. Whereas with the Rolling Stones, because they just kept rolling, there's the amazing stuff like Beggar's Banquet, Sticky Fingers, Aftermath, Exile on Main Street, and then there's a lot of very not amazing stuff that's in there also. All right, I got really off track. So, yeah. Yeah, don't ask me about classic rock nerd stuff in the chat, or else I'm just going to do an hour about that before I make it back to politics. But yeah, so I was going to say that the next actual episode of the podcast, Give Them an Argument, episode 12, recording on Saturday. Coming out as always on Monday on YouTube, is going to have Greg Belvidere, who's going to come in for about 20 minutes at the beginning to talk about worker cooperatives, which is obviously like very important to the heart of what the show stands for. Workers' control of means of production, that logic in classic and country music, and Harvey says Win is classic rock. Yeah, I think it has very vague borders, what the start and points are of the early 80s. So there's going to be Greg Belvidere, who's going to come in to talk. Classic rock is that which is played on classic rock stations. It's a little circular, but it might be about the best you can do as far as a precise definition for necessary and sufficient conditions. Jason says anything Harvey K listened to in high school. I don't know what Harvey was listening to in high school. We haven't had that conversation. Maybe I will sometime in one of his return appearances to the show. So I guess he says he's going to high school from 1965 to 1967. But in any case, Greg Belvidere is going to come on to talk about worker cooperatives for about 20 minutes, and then of course there's going to be the great David Griscom at the end of the show for Outlaws and Revolutionaries. He was off last week because it was his birthday on Saturday when we record, but he's back. And he, Roy asked for book recommendations on unions and labor activism. One that I'm a big fan of is by my buddy Sean Richman. It's called Tell the Bosses That We're Coming. It's from Haymarket Press, Haymarket Books, whatever that's called. But in between Greg Belvidere on Co-ops and Griscom for Outlaws and Revolutionaries for the main part of the show for about an hour, I think. We'll see how long it goes. We're going to have, Harvey K is classic rock, absolutely. We're going to have a panel on the election, and the panelists are going to be, it's a newer book. It came out this year. And Sean is a very thoughtful person, and he was a organizer for the American Federation of Teachers for a long time. I love Achilles' Last Stand. It's actually one of my favorite, that's like a top 5 or 10 Zeppelin song for me. So the election panel is going to be Matt Leck from the Michael Brooks Show, of course, and the Majority Report. By the way, congratulations to Emma Vigland, who just announced that she's joining the Majority Report as a co-host. So, see, this is what happens. You go on GTAA, and in a month or two later, amazing things happen in your career. So it's going to be Matt Leck, and for the election panel, it's going to be Matt Leck and Luke Savage, who's a contributing editor to Jacobin, and Katie Halper, who's always a lot of fun to talk to. So really looking forward to that. Ooh, Booty Blue is interesting. When is my book on Hitchens coming out? Well, I have to actually write it first. I've been working on researching it. I've been mainlining. I've been reading. I've been reading tons of. See that I've been reading tons of Hitchens to get ready for it. My hope is that I can actually get it written within the next few months, so that it can come out in December 2021, which is going to be the exact 10-year anniversary of Hitchens' passing. It's going to be it's not an anti-Hitchens book. I love Hitchens. I think he went really wrong with his foreign policy positions in the last 10 years of his life, but I think there's a lot of good stuff before then. And I think even after that, I think, the Orwell book is from within the last 10 years, granted. I think he probably wrote that pre 9/11. I think Hitch 22, up until the last couple chapters, I think is really good. I think Mortality is kind of an amazing book. That is a bad omen. Missionary Position is great. That's from the 90s, but it's a great book. I love Missionary Position. Fun fact, my grandfather is Croatian. He was born in the United States, but first generation. I think he said English was his third language because they spoke Croatian at home and German in the neighborhood in Youngstown where he grew up. And he only learned English when he went to school. But in any case, my mom showed him the original Vanity Fair article that Hitchens wrote about Mother Teresa, where he calls her a lion Albanian dwarf. And Grandpa's only comment about that was Albanian. I thought she was Croatian. I think Mortality. I mean, it's not political, but I think it's just a great book about death and dying, and it's really what obviously like everything Hitchens wrote. It's really well written. I think God is not great. I'm not really a big fan of. I mean, I'm an atheist, but I'm not really the biggest fan of the new atheist turn in Hitchens' career. But it's a mixed bag. I think there's some good stuff in it. I mean, I think, and then even like. God, I mean, actually, so I was just reading, for example, there's a Hitchens article in the Nation about that was in the bad period even, right? But he wrote some good stuff even in the bad period, which was about the decision that the Supreme Court made in 2002. The article is called "Tinkering with the Death Machine." It's about the decision the Supreme Court made in 2002 about how you should. About the Supreme Court rule that you can't execute mentally disabled people, and he has this article, which is like really actually like you'd think it was something that he was still a hard leftist when he was writing it, because the article, his two objections to the ruling are, one, that it uses IQ as a metric, and he's against that. He thinks that IQ is more or less meaningless. He's got a good line about like trying to figure out what the IQ cutoff is for being mentally disabled. And it depends on which test you do. And he said, I wouldn't want the educational destination of a child to be decided on the basis of such nonsense, never mind whether a human being was gas shot or hung. And then his other objection is that it leaves the sort of underlying monstrosity of the death penalty in place. He says that by like claiming, the Supreme Court was basically claiming you could do a humane, civilized version of the death penalty. And he thinks in some ways that's even more dangerous because yeah, I agree. But still very happy for Emma. So in some ways, he says that's even more dangerous. It would be like if the Supreme Court had ruled that you could still have slavery, but it had limited the use of the lash and the shackle. That it leaves the greater monstrosity underneath. Or like post 9/11, there was this falling out with his friend Martin Amis, who, by the way, is coming out with a novel about Hitchens. It's called Inside Story. And I think actually my copy I pre-ordered is supposed to come tomorrow. I like Amos as a novelist. I think he's not very impressive as a political commentator. But yeah, but Martin Amis and Christopher Hitchens had a story, had a falling out after Hitchens' bad foreign policy turn, but he was still intellectually honest enough to have this falling out with his friend Martin over the Russian Revolution. Martin Amis had written in his book Cobra the Dread that communism was just as bad as fascism, and anybody that supported the Russian Revolution was like a Nazi. And Hitchens wrote some great, like, blistering stuff rebuking Amos about this. Like he has an article, I think it was in Slate. It's just called "Don't Be Silly." And so that's Hitchens at his best. Yeah, I saw that. I actually just read Hitchens's Thomas Paine book, blurb the great Harvey K's Paine book, but in Hitchens's Paine book on page 37, there's a shout out. He says, according to Paine's biographer Harvey K, and then he says whatever he says. So good stuff. Yeah, I did not catch Vosh and Tim Pool. I don't know if I'm gonna, honestly. I don't have anything against Vosh. I have a lot against Tim Pool, but I don't know. That doesn't sound like a fun time to me. I have to say, just on the face of it. Yeah, no. I agree. Like, as much as I like that Hitchens article, I do agree that it's still better that we're not allowed to execute mentally disabled people, and obviously be horrifying if the Supreme Court overturned that now, which they might, because it's 6-3 Republicans, so that's not all out of the question, unfortunately. Yeah. Wow, 4 hours of Washington Pool. Yeah, I don't think I have 4 hours of Washington Pool in me. Sorry, guys. I think I'm probably gonna skip that. Look, on Vosh, I had the one debate with him about class reductionism. Obviously, I think he's wrong there. If you want the short version of why I think he's wrong about that, you can read the article that I did in the Third Rail. It's called Search for the Mythical Class Reductionists. And I think Vosh is right about lots of things, right? I think his politics are definitely much more good than bad. I think that he embodies a certain style of YouTube debate that's not necessarily my thing, though. I'll say that much. All right. All right. Any last questions before I take off? Yeah, God, I would not have done that. I would not, I'd be more than happy to debate Tim Pool anytime he wants to here on YouTube. I'm not going to fly. I'm not going to get in the COVID plane to go to the COVID studio to get COVID for the sake of debating Tim fucking Pool. That's not happening. Thanks for that, brother. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't. Yeah, ramen. I like ramen. When I lived in South Korea, there was a Japanese ramen place that was down the street from my university. I used to go all the time for lunch. I'm a big fan of ramen done right. Yeah, no, I mean, I will like more or less debate anybody. I mean, I wouldn't debate Richard Spencer, because I'm not gonna, because that would be doing him a favor, and I don't like doing Nazis favors. But with very, very few exceptions, I would debate just about anybody, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of ways it is. Yeah, look, I mean, the packaged ramen. I'm not talking about packaged ramen. Good ramen, I like. Yeah. No, Tim Pool has never said anything about anything worth hearing. Trust me on that. Yeah, I mean, is it 2016? It is and it isn't. I mean, obviously, it's happening under very different circumstances with COVID and the economic fallout of COVID. And I do think that Biden is in a much better position than Hillary Clinton was in. But I also think that a lot of people are really overstating that. Thank you very much for the super sticker, torches and pitchforks. I really appreciate it. Thank you. But yeah, I think that it's like 2016 in some ways. It's unlike it in others. I think that Biden's in a better position than Hillary, but I don't think he's got it sewn up. I think he could totally lose. He's going to win the popular vote, but I think he could totally lose the electoral vote. Thank you for the super chat. Joe Garrity asked in super chat, when are you going to make a leaf pile and jump in? Yeah, no, probably not a high priority thing right now. I've got to say, I don't know, I kind of like them all spread out like that. It looks nice. Yeah, Biden could lose. Biden might lose. I mean, obviously, I hope he doesn't. I held my nose and put on my rubber gloves and voted for him on my mail-in ballot in Michigan because it is a swing state. But he might lose. I think that. Yeah, Pennsylvania, because if he lost it because he lost Pennsylvania. That's what looks most likely right now. Biden is ahead in Pennsylvania if you look at the polls, but he's not so far ahead that I feel comfortable just spending election night watching old episodes of The Sopranos and not watching election coverage. Let's put it that way. And so yeah, I think he could lose Pennsylvania. There are ways he could still win the Electoral College if he lost Pennsylvania, but at least my high school classmate Nate Silver. Fun fact: I did go to high school with Nate. We were both on the East Lansing High School debate team for a year, even. All right, thank you so much, Harvey. Always great to see you. You should actually come on to be a guest when I do this next week. But look, yeah. Nate Silver was my high school classmate. Like I said, he was a junior when I was a freshman in '94, '95. But he's a yeah. Look, I mean, he's a. I don't like Nate as a political commentator. I think he's a centrist, and I've been very critical of him in that role. Yeah, he was a nice guy. I didn't interact with him that much in high school, but all my interactions were positive. As far as I can tell, he's a good person who just happens to have lousy politics. So I don't like Nate as a centrist political commentator, but I think that as an election forecaster, he's good at that. Not that he's doing anything that unique, but I mean, I think that kind of poll crunching, I think it's better than just sort of being impressionistic and paying too much attention to individual polls. Joe Garrity asks in Super Chat, thank you so much for that. What's the percentage chance we know the winner on election night? I think if Biden wins, I don't want to put a percent on it. Like, that just seems silly. I'd just be pulling that out of thin air. But I think if Biden wins, there is a yeah. We weren't very close friends. We were on the debate team. I was over at his house once to work on something for that. I remember he had a three-legged dog. His family did. I did get into one political argument with him in high school, although I was 15. I was kind of dumb. I'm not particularly going to defend my side of that argument now. Oh, wow. Is he a libertarian? Okay. I was sure he was just a centrist Dem. But look, what are the chances Biden's going to win? That they're going to announce it on election night. I think if Trump wins, there's almost no chance they would announce it on election night. I think if Trump wins, I think any scenario where Trump wins is going to be, Trump, I think, is going to lose the popular vote. Any scenario by which he wins the electoral vote, I think it's almost certainly. I mean, maybe who knows? I could be wrong. Hey, I thought Hillary was going to win last time, right? I've been wrong about this stuff plenty of times, but I think if Trump wins, it's going to be a weeks or months of litigating very tight contests in swing states, and we're not going to find out on election night. Or at the very least, it's going to be Pennsylvania's still going to be counting the votes for a week or something. If Biden wins, I think there's a decent chance that we'll actually find out on election night. Yeah, I mean, I think if the polls right now are accurate, I think there's a chance that Biden would actually win in enough of a blowout that we'd find out on election night. But I think there's a large chance, even if Biden wins, I think that conditional probability is there's still a decent chance we won't find out on election night. I don't know, arbitrarily call it like a third. There's like a 1/3 chance we'll find out on election night. And if so, I think the conditional probability of Biden winning, if we find out on election night, is almost 100%, which again is not to say that he has it in the bag, because I don't think he does, unfortunately. One, I think that you should never underestimate the ability of centrists to fuck up what seem like unlosable elections. And two, yeah, Trump could totally steal it. That's absolutely within the realm of possibility. And then the other thing is that in this case, we know exactly how Biden could lose. He could lose Pennsylvania, which he might. So I don't think anybody should be complacent about that. I think that I think there is unfortunately some real suspense. And again, going back to the beginning, I think that actually does matter for many reasons, right? Having to do with COVID and DACA and court appointments, but the one that I'm always going to emphasize, because as a socialist, it's the one that's like really right at the heart of my politics, is about labor. About those NLRB appointees, that it matters who is setting the rules of the road for organized labor, and the Trump administration has been more militantly anti-union, really, in some ways, than any since Herbert Hoover. So I think that is a real. I think if you want to preserve the union movement, unfortunately, I do think we are in this awful position of having to care which one of these assholes wins the election. Torches and Pitchforks says Harry Anton looks like the kid from Pet Sematary after the fact. No comment. All right, guys. I think I'm going to call it. So I have to. I've got some writing that I need to get done this evening, and I'm going to watch Nosferatu with Jennifer later tonight over dinner. I mean, I don't know that Trump is a existential threat exactly to democracy. I think he's got some very authoritarian impulses. But are we going to get a significantly less authoritarian Republican coming up? I don't know. Probably not anytime soon. Let's put it that way. So anyway, I'm going to call it. Got some writing to do. Have a call that I need to do with Bhaskar Sankara and Mike Beggs to talk about something that we're working on. So I'm very excited about that. And then, yeah, going to watch Nosferatu with the wife and take the dog on a walk and all that good stuff. So I am, ooh, nice. I will check it out, see if Nosferatu is on YouTube. So thank you, Daniel in Liverpool. Hello to you. Please do, I know this is cliched, but, please do like and subscribe. It really does make a difference here on YouTube, podcast platforms. If you've got the $5 to shell out for the Patreon, that really makes a difference, especially because I would very much, look, long term, I would like to be able to make a living wage off of this, so I can spend more of my life on this and less on teaching. But I'd certainly like the other people who help make this happen every week, to be paid a living wage. So if you can subscribe to the Patreon, please do. That's patreon.com/Ben Burgis. But even if you can't, please do, rate and review. Please do like and subscribe on YouTube. All those things really do make a difference. Been really happy to see how much the show has been growing in the very short amount of time that it's existed. Really excited about that. Thank you very much to everybody who's been supporting it. Thank you to everybody who's been showing up to, make these live streams fun on the chat. I almost forgot, right? So I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, some people might have missed it then, premiering tomorrow night, Thursday night at 7:30 EST, is the Halloween bonus episode where Freddy DeBoer and I talk about the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. So that's Halloween bonus episode, Freddy on Freddy. That's happening tomorrow night, 7:30 EST. And on Friday, I'm going to be doing another live stream. This one is going to be with Lance from the Surfs. So we're probably going to call it, The Road to Surfstom or something cheesy like that. I know Lance really disagrees with Freddy DeBoer on some of his Nightmare on Elm Street rankings. So we might talk about a little bit of that at the beginning, but then we will talk about politics and the election and all of that stuff. So really looking forward to all of that. Halloween bonus episode tomorrow night, live stream with Lance from the Surfs on Friday night. Obviously, the episode records on Saturday, comes out as a podcast on Sunday, premieres here on YouTube on Monday. Still haven't figured out yet what, if anything, I'm going to do on the YouTube channel on election night, so stay tuned for updates on that. But meanwhile, cheers. Left is best.